Welcome to the Dealmaker Show, the number one place for entrepreneurs and dealmakers to learn about leveraging and generating status, frame control, and narrative power to close big deals. Here is your host, investment banker, deal-making expert, and best-selling author of Pitch Anything and Flip the Script, Mr. Oren Klaff.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is the Dealmaker Show. I'm Oren Klaff. I'm the author of Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. If you're not familiar with either of those, get familiar. It is the way the deals are being done. Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Main Street, anywhere where you need to convert a buyer or an investor to your way of thinking. That's Pitch Anything and Flip the Script. So today I have a very interesting guest. I got Peter McCormack from the very well-known podcast on Bitcoin. Actually, it's the number one podcast on Bitcoin, What Bitcoin Did. Peter is dialing in. I'll bring him on now from Nashville. So there's one interesting thing about him is, he's from the south of the United States, but he has this fake British accent. But you'll watch during the podcast, it will start to erode and he'll just start talking in a southern twang, his original birthright. Hey, Peter, welcome to the Dealmaker Show.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Great fake British accent. It's amazing. How do you do it? Right then, mate. If you'll do it, I'll do it.
I perfected it because British accents work much better here in the US.
They do on girls, on bankers, everywhere. So check it out. We got to talk about Bitcoin at a couple different levels here. I wrote some questions, and some of them are technical, but mainly, I think, this is the Dealmaker Show. We want to try and understand, like, guys in real estate. So guys who are running e-commerce companies, women who are running, web e-commerce stores, companies that are just fairly transactional, but they are integrated into commerce through direct payments, through, certainly sending wires back and forth on Bank of America, PayPal, and Venmo, the different payment mechanisms, Stripe. And we have 5,000 companies on our platform that are just transacting day to day. And I think the big thing that I want to get to is, when is the jumping in point that's real for a $10, $20 million, $50 million transactional business, either in services or products, that does a lot of e-commerce, to enter crypto, specifically Bitcoin, because it's confusing if you're a business guy that you don't want to miss the train, or you don't want to get in too early and waste a lot of money and invest time, money, people, energy, resources when you could be competing with your competitors. On the other hand, you don't want this bullet train called Bitcoin just to fly by and you forgot to get on it. So that's where I want to get to today, if that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in order to get there, we got to do some basics. Like, what the fuck is it?
It's magic internet money.
Magic internet money. I like
internet money.
But if I'm an economist, I'm asking you: is it a store of value? Is it a transfer of value? Is it an investment device? Just if we use those three pillars, in your mind, having the number one podcast and being a thought leader on Bitcoin, walk us through what it I think the podcast's over. It's magic internet money. Thank you, everybody, for being here. You now know what Bitcoin is. MIM. You heard it here, magic internet money. So, but other than that, what is it technically?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of ways to answer it. The best way I can put it, it's every one of those things you said. It can be a store of value on the right time frame. It can be a transfer of wealth, and it can be an investment of money. And if we're thinking of your audience, people who may be running businesses, e-commerce business worth tens of millions of dollars, there's two ways to think about Bitcoin. Should they be holding it on their balance sheet within their treasury, and should they be accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment?
Yes.
I'm more pro the former, and the reason I'm pro the former is because I do it myself. I don't intend to hold massive amounts of pounds in my balance sheet. I tend to hold the pounds that I need to run my business over a certain time frame, and depending on where we are in a cycle, I tend to hold either less or more in pounds. But
with all due respect, you run a podcast, okay? Like, what do you mean for your business? Which business?
Well, the podcast, I mean, it'll turn over $3 million this year, so I have to think about that.
All right. So fair enough. So it's a sizable business. Sorry, it's just confusing, because like our customers have, warehouses of auto glass, $30 million on auto glass, and they do have a balance sheet. But you're saying
Are they profitable?
Well, these guys, yeah.
Well, so am I. So whether it's a 3 million turnover or 30 million turnover, the explanation I would give is exactly the same. I think some people think, oh, because you've got a podcast, they think of it as a little hobby home business. But I've got a team of 6, and we have a significant turnover.
Well,
so in terms of that,
yes.
that point is that if you're holding money on your balance sheet, which is long term cash within your treasury, it may be one of the things you want to consider is that you hold Bitcoin to protect the wealth long term.
But let's go deeper. And by the way, as mean as I'm being to you about your podcast, my friends call me up, who have real businesses, and they go, hey, how much money did you take from little old ladies buying your course today? So that's how they, real estate guys doing $100 million of real estate a year view my business. So, I have to be mean to you because it's the kick the cat, theory.
Be mean to me. It's fine. I can take it.
But
people don't consider it a business. They think I'm some guy in a room with a button that I press on and off and publish, and it's not. It's actually it's a business. So I run it like a business. It's an efficient, lean machine, and I intend to maximize my revenues, but also maximize the long-term potential of my revenues.
So let's dig in though as a practical measure, and I think it's great to take a podcast as a business because it's hyper efficient, right? Supply chain is very efficient. You're not waiting for glass to come in from a glass manufacturer, stored in the warehouse out back, and having an inventory system and trying to predict order volume in order to maintain inventory volumes in the warehouse and supply chain that could be disrupted by COVID. You've got a very hyper efficient business. So that's terrific for trying to understand the use case of Bitcoin. What do you use it for on your balance sheet to help run the business?
So this is more about the long-term protection of the money the business makes.
Okay.
If we're witnessing, depends on the ranges people give you. CPI figure might be 4 or 5% inflation. We know if we look at housing and other things, inflation is probably a little bit higher. The money I keep on the balance sheet is not money I intend to spend now. So I'll give you an example. At the start of the year, I took on a advertising contract that was $200,000. I gave them 10% discount to pay in Bitcoin. So they paid, and Bitcoin at that time was, I can actually give you the number if you want it. It gives you a good idea.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin at the time when I took that 180,000 was, here we go. Give me 1 second. 20. I'm trying to find where it is. I don't know the actual price, but it's 180,000 Bitcoin, and that's back in January. That Bitcoin now is worth 293,000. So just holding that on the balance sheet, I've increased the size of that contract by 50%. So that's one of the things I do.
So the mind of a skeptic goes then to volatility. How come Peter can get ahead of volatility, but Joe Bag of Donuts investor? I mean, somebody gave me a statistic: 90% of the people who come into the Bitcoin trading market, within 3 months, have reduced their capital base, by 80%, and basically have lost money trading. Maybe not an actual statistic. I see you wincing at it. But also I'm good at making stuff up. Maybe I made that up, but I think or maybe that's a statistical sample of one of me. But anyway, but how come you aren't experiencing the volatility that seems to be there for people entering the market?
No, but I do experience the volatility. The volatility exists, but what I say is, like, at the end of each month, I tend to use it depends on where we're on the cycle. If we're early in the cycle, or if I believe we're early in the cycle, I tend to hold 8 weeks cash flow, personal and business, in cash. So then I can always run my business, and I can always pay my costs, pay my team, etc. But anything I need over that is just transferred into Bitcoin. So that's happening on a month-by-month basis. So I'm buying when the price is high and when the price is low. But if you look at the long-term chart, the price on the long-term chart has always gone up. It's basic supply and demand economics for the value of Bitcoin. So I just tend to hold it on my balance sheet. This is money I don't intend to spend, and I want to build long-term wealth in my business.
So that's fantastic and very helpful. And I just want to continue peeling back, the layers of the garlic here to get to the middle of it. I think about it this way. You have been in very early, and so you're basising up. Today, when people think about getting in and they're not hyper technical, they're not in crypto, and they're just wondering, is it priced too high? Can they still get in? Can it still roll? If it is going to roll, why isn't all the people like you going in heavier and deeper than you already are? How can a neophyte get in today relatively safely?
Yeah, well, I think holding 90 to 95% of personal and business cash in Bitcoin is going in deep. I am going in deep.
Yeah. Okay.
But when you talk about the price and it's looking expensive, I don't think I've ever bought Bitcoin and not felt that it looks expensive.
Yeah.
It looked expensive when I bought it at $50,000. It looked expensive at $20,000. When I bought my very first Bitcoin at $80, I thought it was expensive. It always seems expensive. That's just one of the ways it is, because you're buying this new thing that you've never heard of, this like decentralized digital money. But I have a fundamental belief in the long-term remonetization of the world, with people moving to a Bitcoin standard. We've had a gold standard before. The problem with the gold standard was centralized. It was easy for the governments to come off the gold standard. The great thing about Bitcoin standard is it can be individual. You can do it yourself. So I operate on a personal Bitcoin standard. I've set my trajectory of what I want to achieve in life multi-year. I don't buy any Bitcoin that I don't intend to hold for at least 4 years, but ideally 10. And therefore, if I believe in the long-term fundamentals of Bitcoin and the thesis of remonetization of the world, I have no interest in holding more dollars and pounds than I want to. So that's why I do it. That's the future I'm trying to build for me, and that's the future I'm trying to build for my business. And it's worked out very well for me. It might only be a podcast, but it makes good money, and it's worth a lot more than it would be if I was holding my money in pounds.
So that's great. And just for context, do you have a family? Are there other people? Like, it would be helpful to understand what your risk profile is for decision making, based on what your other commitments are in life.
Yeah, I have 2 children, both in private school. Very expensive. I have let's say I have a taste in nice cars. I live
so two kids, but how many wives? That's the number that really matters.
One ex-wife.
Okay, one ex-wife.
One ex-wife. But look, I've got the same as most people. I've got that standard like family risk profile. I've been divorced. I don't have a pension. My pension is my business and my investments. But the thing is, like, what I would be saying to anyone listening to this is that if they're thinking about investing in Bitcoin personally with their business, the first thing they have to do is they have to get behind the thesis of what Bitcoin is. There's a really great article, which has now been turned into a book. It's called The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. It's written by a guy called Vijay Boyapati. He compares Bitcoin to the pound, to the dollars, to gold, all the different the monetary instruments out there, and explains why Bitcoin is the best. And when you go down that rabbit hole, you understand why it's the best form of money, which is, I find, hard to debate. The one thing people have to get their head around is the volatility. But the volatility is the price you pay for being part of this remonetization of the world. And volatility over time does reduce, but this is the price you pay. And if you can't buy a Bitcoin and hold it for 4 years, you probably shouldn't be buying it.
Take us through. I'm interested. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm very interested in some Peter's experiences. So take me through sort of your lowest low during your Bitcoin, investing, process, and your highest high. And so walk us through those situations and what you felt like in those moments. I'd be very interested to hear that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I first started investing properly in 2017. I put £32,000 in, and I bought Bitcoin, but I bought all the other cryptocurrencies as well.
Yeah.
And I was trading loads. I did really well. Got my stack up to a worth in dollar value around $1.5 million, but got super greedy. Didn't understand market cycles. Decided I wanted to get into mining. Bought loads of other cryptocurrencies, and that all crashed down. And then at my lowest point, that got me to around 60,000. So it was a pretty big fall from the top. But I use that as a lesson. I use that as a lesson to reconsider what my approach to life is going to be. I stopped trading because trading's really hard. I decided all I'm going to do is just stack Bitcoin. I'm going to forget all the other cryptocurrencies, and I'm going to focus on my business and grow my business. And therefore, I don't have to think about the value or the price of Bitcoin at any moment, because I make enough money in my business to have the life I want. But I am able to build a future for myself by buying Bitcoin as and when I want it.
So, and then can you just take us in a little bit deeper? Like, so it hit 60,000, and where were you when that happened? Just to take us through that day. You know what?
Oh,
How did the date start? Yeah.
It wasn't really a day. I mean, it was a period of time. So 2017, we had this massive bull run. It was all really exciting. You know, I've bought myself a watch and flying first class and thought I was a fucking genius, but obviously I wasn't. And then the market crashed in January, and I just thought it would come back, and it never did. And then I had all this mining equipment, and by the time I got out mining and the market had bottomed out, the value of my cryptocurrency was, like I say, about $60,000. And that was a real moment of like, okay.
And so I'm just very interested. So do you have friends you do this, and you called them up and you commiserated? How did it go through that when you were in that period of time? Like, how did you get yourself out of? I'm very interested in these lows. I love the highs.
There wasn't so much of a low though, honestly. Like, it was like, oh crap, that happened. But like, I've made and lost a couple of million a couple of times. You get used to it. I don't hugely worry about money. I enjoy more the journey of building businesses.
Yeah.
I've built 2 businesses now, and that are plus $1 million turnover. I'm never going to build $100 million company, but I always enjoy being like behind and having the chase. So when when it went down to 60,000, there was this moment I was like, oh, crap. I don't have an income. Most of my my podcast is just fairly started. And I've got mortgage to pay and kids to pay for. I was like, okay, and just need to rethink this. And I realized what happened was by being a trader, I was chasing and I was being greedy and thinking, oh, I can trade this to X million dollars. So I just decided to stop that. Trading's hard. I decided I was just going to go and build a business, which I've done with the podcast, and I just dedicated myself to that. There was never really a huge low.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I just sorry to interrupt you, but it's a lot like Hollywood, right? Movies is like trading. Like, people love, it's so exciting writing movies, getting scripts, but it's not a business, right? There's something like 2,400 movies, put out a year, 20 of them get watched. You can make money in it like trading, but it's not a business like trading. Television is a business. You can get a scripted show. You're filming every week. You're working hard at it. It's an actual job. You have to show up and do things. People expect things of you. You have responsibilities, but you're running a business in television, and you're making modest amount of money, but it is repeatable, consistent, and you're in an industry in which you have a name. So I like this. I like this notion of, hey, and I believe in this. We're using Bitcoin during the process of running our business, and it's part of the business we're running, which is where I started and want to get to when we finish. But the business is not trading crypto.
Not for me.
So I think a lot of people believe that that's how you do crypto, that's how you do Bitcoin, is you have a part of you and you're trading it, and that's your that's how you make money with it. But really, what I hear you saying, and I agree with, is that you are running and growing your business, and the crypto or the Bitcoin strategy is an adjunct to it and is a multiplier of the business in which you're focused on running.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like I said, I've traded, and if you can think you're a genius trading if you hit the market at the right time, because it flies up and you think, oh my God, I'm so clever, I've made all this money. And then very quickly you lose it, but you don't sell straight away because you think it might come back and the six further. I gave it a go. I had a lot of fun in that year, but I realized that wasn't for me. I'd build businesses, and I've built them before. I was like, okay, I've got this podcast. Let me see where I can take this and focus on that. And like I say, this year it'll do somewhere between $2.5–3 million. Next year it'll do around $5 million. And what I can do is use the profits from that, one, to invest in the product to make the podcast better. Now I'm getting into film now, but also I can just invest that in Bitcoin and build long-term financial security for myself and my children.
So I think we have to talk about cars for just a minute, because you mentioned cars. And so where does your passion for cars come from, and what kind of cars are we talking about? Like, where are you owning them? Are you driving them? Are you racing them? You're collecting them? What?
No, I'm a boy, and a boy who won't ever grow up. I like fast cars. I'm sure you do. It's very rare you meet a boy, a man who doesn't like cars. I love cars. So, yeah. If you ask about the highs, this year I bought myself an Aston Martin.
Okay, but Aston Martin makes 17 different models up and down. So a one, a
Vantage.
1.7 Vantage, yeah.
Yeah. So I bought a Vantage, and I bought myself a Rangy. Bought my dad a car. Bought my dad a Jag. He always wanted a Jag, so I bought him one. Bought my son a car.
I'm noticing a trend here of fine British motor cars.
Well, I bought my son a Mercedes, so he's got a German car. But I try and stick with British.
Yeah, so whenever you guys need to go somewhere over 100 miles.
Yay, easy. We take the train.
Can we use the 300E? No, I love cars. I probably have 13, 14 cars and 20, 25 motorcycles, but I'm older than you. And
what's your favorite car that
you own? So it's tough. It's tough because I built a truck to take my son to school in, and because it's, we're involved together. So I built a 1956 Ford F100 on 46-inch Troop transport tires. So it's a monster. And I take him to school, and it's a very extreme experience in the little bit of time we get to spend together in the morning. But it's just so, he and I, and it just creates this experience. And we go to the coffee shop. So that's my favorite because it involves him. But I've got a Defender, Land Rover 87 Land Rover Defender that we had restored in England and shipped over here, and that's fun because it's just a piece of history.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Defender is awesome. I have some cool cars. I have a Performante, the Lamborghini Performante. It was a super fun car. Yeah, so that's great. So you have to pay extra for no color. You know that? You can get the green or the orange, or the bright yellow. You can get those very easily, but mine's matte gray. But you can go ahead and wait. You can go ahead and wait 90 days and pay $18,000 extra for no color. But I'm not a drug dealer, so I can't just kind of pull up to meetings in a bright orange Lamborghini and, sort of go incredibly tell people how they should invest in Bitcoin.
It has to be black or gray.
Has to be black or gray. So I went to the Lamborghini factory. This is awesome. We got to get back to Bitcoin. But so I visited the factory to pick up the car. And as they're coming off the line, the Performantes and the Huracans, I got to be careful not to be insult various cultures, but you can literally see what country and what city the car is going to by the color of the car and the color of the seats. So
a few gold ones are going to Dubai.
So the gold ones are going to Dubai. Bright orange with yellow seats are going to Singapore. The black, the triple black with the triple black interior, those ones are going to London.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just tell which country is taking receipt of the car by the color scheme. So it's amazing. So cars, Bitcoin. So walk me through. I'm just interested in the psychology of your high, because in every business, every deal maker has lows, but he also has wins. And when, my partner, whenever he wins big, he always tries to just throw away some money. He goes and buys something. Now he's won so many times, he finds charities to give it to that are really interesting and creative. Mm-hmm. But when you got some big wins and you decide to fly first class and get a Rolex or whatever it is, so do you remember the emotions of that time? And then how did you decide to pull yourself back and go, hey, that's not me? Or maybe it is you. I don't know.
The two biggest highs, one has been more of, one is a financial, but one has been more a career step. And there've been two this year. Buying my dad a car was a high. My dad made a lot of sacrifices for me as a kid, and all he ever wanted was a Jaguar, and he could never do it. He was like an aircraft engineer, and all his money went into my education. So he just never got to do that. His dream was to have a Jaguar. So, earlier this year, he was about to change his car. So I was like, Dad, we're going to get you a Jag. So we did, and he loves it. And that was awesome. That was such a cool thing to be able to do for him. Career high for me was was a very surreal moment a couple of months ago where I got to sit down and interview the president of El Salvador. And you got to remember, like, you probably don't know this, but like I used to work in advertising in London, and I had a fairly successful business. It was a 3 million turnover, 45 staff. I got divorced and just went into depression, and the company collapsed. I ended up with a drug addiction. So the company collapsed. I ended up
Wow.
in hospital with the drug addiction. I lost everything, like literally lost everything. Had to start again. And during that period, I'd start this podcast, but really as a hobby. I didn't start it thinking, oh, it's going to generate millions of dollars in revenue. And it grows and it gets bigger. And I find myself sat in El Salvador interviewing the president of the country, which was a totally surreal experience just to be there interviewing a president of a sovereign nation. And I got on the flight on the way home and I was just like, excuse my language, but fuck, this is crazy. How did this even happen? And yeah, I mean, I was quite emotional about it, to be honest, because you know, it's like as a man, like a part of your ego and part of what makes you who you are is have you been successful in life? And I know that's not for everyone, but I lost everything and I just didn't have the energy to start another business. I was never going to start another agency, and I
Yeah.
didn't have the energy to have 40, 50 staff ever again and do that. And I genuinely didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I assumed I'd end up just on a modest salary in my hometown, looking after my kids, and not living, just living a very basic life. And this podcast has just taken me around the world. I've been to 40 countries where I've got to interview all the top people in the industry. I get people email me every day saying thank you for what you do, and it's really humbling. But to then find yourself interviewing a president was just such a surreal moment, and that meant more than any of the money. Like I'm not super wealthy, but like I've got more money than I need. That means a lot more to me what I could actually do in terms of the job.
I think this is really interesting, and I know we're supposed to put today. Well, the mandate here and the promise here is decrypting Bitcoin, not the emotions of money. But I think because of the business I'm in, which is money, and transferring people from owning a business to selling all or part of the business off. And so we see people step into 10 million, 50 million. I have a guy right now who's stepping into north of $100 million. There's not enough fucking shit for you to buy unless you start looking at boats with $100 million. Like, they peak out. They buy everything that they ever imagined, and then they go another circle out and buy things that are like a more extreme version of. So you can buy a McLaren, right? Which is you always imagine having a supercar, and all of a sudden you have $29 million. You can get whatever supercar you want. So you buy a McLaren 720, which is I don't know, $480,000. So then you go, okay, well, I love cars even more, so I'm going to buy a McLaren Senna. That's $1.8 million. Oh, well, you still have $24 million left after you bought like every car you ever dreamed of. And so then you buy a watch. I mean, the most you can get is like a Richard Mille Tourbillon, which might be $1.2 million. And now you have $23 million left. Right. There's just, so you buy, and then you buy two houses, but houses really aren't that expensive. A $5 million house, $7 million house, you finance some of it, maybe you put $2 million into each one. So now you got $19 million left, and you've bought everything you could ever think of that requires money. And now you have $19 million left. And that's being invested with the, Rothschilds group or whatever, Goldman Sachs, and they're getting you in this market, 9, 10, 11% return. So as you're sitting on that $19 million, it turned into 21 while you were, sitting at your lake house, listening to Peter McCormack's podcast, what Bitcoin did. And so then you're just sitting around with $19 million or $10 million or $50 million with yourself. And the wheel stops turning, and there you are. Like, you can only run so far away from yourself with the money, and now you're just left with your values, your emotions, your family, your kids. And so, this Bitcoin stuff, I think we come back to where you started, which is you have to use it to augment what you're doing, not as hopium, dreamium, get me out of whatever situation I'm in with Bitcoin. I mean,
listen, let me ask you something, because I've got a very simple view on money. Do you remember when you first realized you're a millionaire? Because being a millionaire is like that thing where you're a kid or younger, you're like, I want to be a millionaire. But because it's like a measure of success. Do you remember when it first happened?
For me, easy. Yes.
Hold on. Are you there?
Yeah.
Hello, I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you?
Check. Mic check. 1 2
Hold on.
0019er. This is Foxtrot Zulu. We are on approach on runway 73. You are cleared for go weapons hot. Go weapons hot. Target is in sight. Peter, call the ball.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, this is so annoying. I can't. There you go. My daughter tried
Okay.
to call me and it flipped me onto the phone. So do you remember when you first realized
Sure,
you were
very easy. Remember the moment, the second, the millisecond in time, because it was just like, oh my God, I can relax for 2 weeks.
But did anything really change?
No, nothing.
Nothing changes, right? So I got this very simple view of money, in that there's that saying, money can't buy you happiness, and I think there's an ounce of truth in that. But the truth is, being broke sucks. Like, thinking you can't pay your mortgage sucks. Thinking you can't give your kids what they need sucks. But actually, what you need, the basics of what you need, is you want the ability to be able to pay your mortgage, go on a holiday once or twice a year, and when you go to the shops, you do your supermarket shopping, or you take your kids to go buy clothes. You can buy what you want without thinking about it. You don't have to budget. That once you've reached that level, you don't have to worry about money, and you don't have to worry about filling up your car. That gets rid of a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of crap in your life. Everything beyond there, it doesn't make that much of a difference, right? So you can earn 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, and yes, you can buy stuff, but it's not going to make you happy. It might temporarily. I remember when I got my first Porsche ride, I was so happy, and in about 2 weeks, it just became the car I drove. That kind of those inner feelings you have, or those things that you want, it's not going to make you happy.
So
And
we moved to a new office on South Beverly Drive in Beverly Hills. The business was acquiring world-class motorcycles that had racing provenance. The office next door to us was a modeling agency. So for perspective, Beverly Hills buying motorcycles as art, everything was, and any motorcycle we bought would go on the cover of Rob Report, and these were $250,000, like they had racing provenance to it. And then we would get cars as well, Ferrari or Bugatti, because one would just spill over into the business. And the business next door was a modeling agency, right? And then I lived in the Hollywood Hills as well. And that was amazing, like for 30 days. And then it's just a business. The models come by and, they're parking in your spot, and they're, they're just your neighbors, and the motorcycles are just assets, and you're running low on inventory, and you deliver a product to a customer, and he, doesn't want to pay his final bill, and it's just a business after a few weeks. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and the reason I talk about this is you have to make a lot of sacrifices to be successful in life. Anybody who's gone out there who's made 10, 50, $100 million, they've made a lot of sacrifices. And you might make a load of money, but one of those sacrifices might be you see your kids less. And you might think you can turn around to your kids and, they're like, Dad, why are you working? It's like, listen, I'm paying the school fees. Look at this great life we have. They don't give a shit. They give a shit about having time with you as your dad. They don't care about what car you're driving, any of that stuff. So, once I hit that first million, which I lost again, it never really bothered me after that, because honestly, prior to where I am now, the happiest time in my life, I didn't have much money, and the most miserable time is when I was my wealthiest. My marriage had broken up and I was feeling crap. So I kind of know now that money does not buy happiness. It gets you away from depressing broke. That's true. Like, get that base sorted out, but I wouldn't say to anyone out there to go and sacrifice things that you can't get back, like time. Like, time is an important asset as anything, and you don't get time back. Once you've given it away to a company and been in an office, you don't ever get that back. You don't get back the time with your kids. My son's 17 now, excuse me. He's hanging out with his friends all the time. He's going to go to college next year. It might be that time where I see him a few times a year. I can't get back the time that I lose now. So, as much as people want to go and make money and think they should, it doesn't really give you what you think it does. It doesn't repair any of the emotional trauma you have. It doesn't It doesn't make you any more friends. It doesn't get you that hot chick and then you're suddenly happy. It just none of that actually happens. And if you earn loads more money than your friends, actually, it kind of sucks because they can't do what you want to do and you kind of feel embarrassed. So I think when people start to think about making lots of money, they really need to think about why and what the impact will be. Because I don't know any person who's made a load of money who says that solved all their life problems.
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, again, we see lots of people transitioning into, so they sell their business and they do something, I mean, literally for 2 weeks, and then they start a new business.
Yeah.
And this is, proof positive of what you're saying. I have a question for you, getting back to the topic on hand.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. This is more important than, and I know, what I did with my $1 million is I moved my office to within 6 miles or 6 minutes of my house. So any time of the day that my son breaks free from school or has a free moment, I can just go home and spend it with him or take him to the beach. So that's the best thing in the world that I could ever think of to do with my money. One word for you: China. So, the headlines at the beginning of this week were China says that all Bitcoin transactions are illegal. Unpack that headline for us through the mind of Peter.
Well, so over time, China is becoming more and more hostile towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Let's be honest. But it's really unsurprising. China is an authoritarian state that runs a social credit score, which rewards you based on behavior, censors information, forces international companies to censor information, controls a lot of Hollywood now in terms of the things you might see in a film. You can very rarely see criticism of China. It controls I think pretty much controls the NBA. It is what it is. Why would they ever allow someone to hold a financial asset which they can't control? So bit by bit, they've been banned. Announcements of banning it over and over again, year after year. But it seems they've got pretty serious with it now. This year, they've banned mining, they've banned holding the Bitcoin, they've banned the companies that transact in Bitcoin, which is great news. Finally, we can forget about China and say, okay, you have separated yourself from the refinancialization of the world. If Bitcoin continues to grow, they're just not part of that. It's one of those things that hangs over your head that I'm now glad it's gone. We don't even have to worry about Bitcoin and China again. We're done. They've chosen to separate themselves from that. It's not surprising though. I mean, look, they're making lots of big decisions at the moment. They tried to cool the housing market, which we saw the impact with Evergrande. They've got power issues at the moment because they're trying to cut down on the emissions. They're making lots of big decisions. It's not surprising that they banned Bitcoin. It doesn't change my life in any way. I mean, the Bitcoin price dipped, but generally speaking, I get on and do what I do.
So you go to a party, you're buying some Bitcoin, as we're doing. We have some Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We're talking about it at a party. And of course, the egalitarian, social consciousness, environmentalist leader of the group brings over a little pack of environmentalists and says Bitcoin mining is
boiling the ocean,
heating the atmosphere, melting the polar bears environment, and causing global warming to accelerate at a rate in which we can't meet the X% by X date. And to this, you say what?
I say you're misinformed. You don't understand Bitcoin mining. Look, Bitcoin mining is power intensive. It is energy intensive. It is required to build the security model of which protects you Bitcoin. That's a conversation for another day. That'll take a long time. But what I would say is, look, the Bitcoin is transitioning, and Bitcoin miners are transitioning to find the best and most clean energy possible. So that if you look at it directionally, Bitcoin mining is becoming cleaner. What a lot of Bitcoin miners are looking to do is actually buy up excess power. They're incentivized to find the cheapest power possible, so they have better margins. So one of the best places they can buy power is the excess energy that goes to waste from source. So what you'll do is you'll find Bitcoin miners at places like, ideally, at places like hydro dams or power generation points, because the energy that isn't used is then lost, right? And if you're going to lose that energy, you might as well sell it to someone. So sell it to a Bitcoin miner. So that's where one place they're misinformed. But I would also be saying to them, look, you just have to look at this on balance. Look how much energy the traditional financial system uses. Look at the ecological disaster, which is the gold industry. What we have here is the best form of the money that can help anyone in the world. This is something that you really should be looking at on balance.
So when I spoke to Anthony Scaramucci, the
Mhm.
point he made is how much does it cost to run a single Bank of America branch, over here on Carlsbad Avenue, for a year? And have you run that kind of analysis of like what a bank branch costs to run versus the equivalency in asset transfer underneath Bitcoin? Like, are there any moral and energy equivalencies along those lines that make sense?
There probably are, but I don't have them to hand. I couldn't give you a good answer. What I would be saying is that Bitcoin miners are buying up waste energy that would not be used. They are also incentivized to move towards cleaner power, but also just look at it on balance. It's like, how much of the world's energy does Bitcoin mining use? It's negligible compared to other industries. It really doesn't move if you were to ban Bitcoin mining tomorrow, it's not going to change the big issues we're facing with global warming.
Have you seen this show, Bering Straits Gold? You have to watch it.
Okay.
So basically, it's a reality show, and these guys go out on a barge of I don't know where, somewhere, and they have these giant pipes that go down into the ocean floor, right? And so they're sucking up tons of dirt, and it comes down a conveyor belt, and they're literally mining it for little tiny flakes of gold, and then all kinds of drama ensues, and they have to wear these deep sea diving cell bells, and it's very dangerous, and they're sucking up the floor, and the air stops circulating them, and their fingers get cut off, and it's very dangerous. And by the end of the season, they've gone through hundreds of tons of the floor of the ocean bed using a barge, and who knows how much energy, and they've collected 3 shitty vials of gold, and then they go into town and they sell it for $3,800, and they spread the 12,000, whatever it is, and they each make a couple $1,000, and so I think of that, and you got to watch an episode of it. It's amazing drama, but I think of that, and it reminds you of how much effort and impact there is to mine gold and these other commodities that back currencies.
Do you want to know the important point of this? This is the really crucial, important point of understanding Bitcoin, because Bitcoin and gold are very similar in some ways. They're scarce resources that people want to own, and they're scarce resources that people want to own to store their wealth in. But if you compare them to the dollars, right? Joe Biden wants to he has a stimulus bill worth $3.5 trillion. Now, that $3.5 trillion is essentially going to be created at the click of a button. Money that is created that easily starts to lose its value. That's why you get inflation or hyperinflation situations. You look what happened in Lebanon over the last couple of years. I mean, the currency is debased by 90%. I think Turkey's like 60% over 5 years. We can look at hyperinflationary events in Zimbabwe and Venezuela. It's all happened because it's so easy to print money. You can't print gold and you can't print Bitcoin. They both require work. In Bitcoin, we call it proof of work. They require the expenditure of energy, and the skills and resources of people to create something of value. That's what gives it value. It's hard to mine Bitcoin. It is hard to mine gold. So those things have value because they're scarce and they're hard to get. So this is why people want to own these rather than owning these paper bills that the government can print as they choose. Because what comes after the next 3.5 trillion? What comes after that? More tax and more printing. So I think that story you told is really important for another reason, because you're explaining the proof of work. The work went into mining that gold. It's a lot of effort. And they did it because they know it has value. What's the point in going out and working? If you're in Lebanon, you go out and you work super hard knowing that your money is collapsing. Like, it destroys the incentive to work. And this is what's great about Bitcoin. It is replacing the rent seekers within the political class with the productive class who want to go out and work hard and make money and store their value. So it's super important.
Yeah. And hey, can you hold on? I just got to pay for this Starbucks. How much is it? Oh, 4.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars. Yeah. So, yeah, hold on. Hey, can you guys go in the warehouse there and get another crate of Zimbabwean dollars? We got to pay for this coffee.
Hey, dude, I've been to Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
I've been and I've seen what it's like. I've been to the markets where they now use the currency to make handbags and like little ornaments.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen what happens to a country when this happens. We need sound money because the political class makes everybody else pay for their mistakes. That's what they do because they have a. If you had an ability to print money in your house, you would, but you don't. So you know what money you need to pay your rent and pay your mortgage, to pay your bills, and you work hard to do it. The political class do not have to do that because it's like in the COVID situation when we went into lockdowns and businesses closed. And this isn't an argument for or against lockdowns, but when we did go into lockdowns, these decisions were made by the political class. Everybody who worked in the civil service kept their jobs. Everyone who worked in government kept their jobs. While restaurants and ice cream parlors and hairdressers and beauticians all closed down because they didn't have access to money or enough money to run their business. So I think the sooner we take away the creation and distribution of money from the government, the better.
Walk me through, for people listening, maybe 2 at most 3 buying strategies that make sense for a certain archetype of person. So the first person is family guy, father of 2, has a good job. Say, I mean, who knows what a good job is? We live in San Diego. Every house is $5 million. Like, who's living where there's no poor people anywhere? Like, every house is $5 million. It sort of boggles imagination. But so a family making $280,000, 2 kids, they're spending a lot of it. Coastal California, just to live and pay a mortgage, have 2 cars, send the kids to school, everybody on iPhone, and have internet, and pay for everything you need. Buy it, shop at Whole Foods. They've got so taxes on that 280, they're going to pay 80, so maybe 200 remaining, mortgage, cars, kids, school, 100. So maybe they got 80 in disposable income remaining from that, and then they sort of have to decide what to do with it. Of that $80,000 in disposable income that family generates, what are you thinking would be a sound, Bitcoin acquisition strategy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For that one who had 80,000 disposable, I would tell them to just go out and buy themselves 1 Bitcoin. Just firstly get off zero, but just go and get a whole Bitcoin. And the reason I would say that is they have the money to do that. We're talking there's 21 million Bitcoin ever. That's there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and of those, we estimate 4 million have already been lost. Okay, so we're talking 21 million Bitcoin, but what is it, like 43 millionaires in the US? Do the math. There's not going to be enough to go around. And that's just the US. Let's talk about worldwide. So go buy that 1 Bitcoin, put it away, and don't touch it for 10 years.
Beautiful.
And then what I would say is, and the next one is the same strategy for everyone. And it's the same. It's constantly the same. Every Bitcoin you hold, you should not be thinking of selling within 4 years, because that's like the longest it takes for a Bitcoin to mature. The longest. But what you should therefore be doing is just avoiding the price, because the volatility will drive the fear and greed. We always talk about strategies called dollar cost averaging. You'll know it. Dollar cost averaging means pick an amount of money and pick a period of time and buy that Bitcoin at the same rate constantly. That could be these people with $5,000 a month every single month at the end of the month buying $5,000 worth. But it could be somebody who's relatively lower income buying $50 a week or even $10 a week. But whatever the amount is, be consistent on the time, be consistent on the amount. Then you ride out the volatility because you're averaging in. So if you're buying now at 40,000, it drops to 30,000, you're then buying at 30,000. When it goes back up to 40,000, you bought Bitcoin lower. And that's a strategy you should buy continually. I'm going to dollar cost average and for the rest of my life. I consistently buy.
So next buying strategy, and I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, I'm just picking an archetype, but, say a guy running a podcast, has tattoos on both arms, just as a broad, generic example, has a $3-4 million podcast, a couple of kids, a British accent, sitting on a couch, whatever, with some black and white striped pillows, but it could be anybody. What would be a good Bitcoin acquisition strategy for that archetype?
Well, I'm irresponsibly long Bitcoin. I'm irresponsibly long Bitcoin. Okay. Like I say, I hold 8 weeks cash flow, business and personal, in pounds. Everything else is in Bitcoin. and that's the way I operate. And the reason I operate that for like that is because I believe the money system is broken, and we're remonetizing the world with Bitcoin. And everybody I know who has Bitcoin, they operate on a Bitcoin standard. The great thing about Bitcoin, it teaches you lessons as well. And the main one we talk about is time preference. Do you have a long or short time preference? If you have a short time preference, you're always thinking about the things you want now. The problem is with Bitcoin, every bit of Bitcoin you spend, you start to think about it. It's like, do I need that car? Do I want that house? Do I want that holiday? Because if I spend my Bitcoin now, that Bitcoin might be worth 10x in 4 years. So perhaps I shouldn't. So I'm irresponsibly long, and it's made me really rethink the things I buy. And I have a nice car, but I live in a standard 4-bedroom house, and I don't really spend a huge amount on things these days. And because everything I think about could be something for the future.
Oh, you don't really? Come over and run my house for a month. You'll
buy Bitcoin and see how you do. You'll change. But the other thing is, look, I've been fortunate as well, so I tend to give a lot away. I was just out in El Salvador, and I gave $50,000 to 2 projects which are helping addicts on the street. Obviously, being previously an addict, it's something that was quite close to me, and I visited 2 facilities which helps addicts get off the street and reintegrate back in society. And I've been fortunate enough for what I do, so I gave them $50,000. And if I look, I'm not gonna. I don't know about what you think about your kids, but my kids won't get everything I made. They'll get enough to buy a house and keep themselves going, but they have to go out in the world and make their own money. And I'll tend to
I hear that. This is really an interesting argument. I hear this all the time, and I think the guys that I hang out with that have kids, and my kid's 7. How old do you have? One kid that's 17. How old is your
17 and 11?
17 and 11. So your 11-year-old is not that far away from my 7-year-old. I don't think that way. Like, I want him to have. I trust him enough, and I want him to have every option that I can create for him to do good in the highest way that he can do it. And money is just a tool and a lever. So if he's got to spend 15 years getting up to the capital base that I can just provide him on day one, I feel like I'm moving the time needle efficiently for him to do more good and better.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm going to give my kids enough to raise them up to the capital base. They'll be able to afford a home and pay their bills, etc. But I'm not going to overcapitalize my children when there's plenty of other people out there who are also underwater and I could possibly help. So they're going to get a better start and opportunity than 99.9% of people. I just know in that other 99.9% of people, there's a bunch of other, like, given $20,000 to this one facility in El Salvador, reintegrates maybe across that year 50 people back in with their families, addicts who are away from their children, their wives, their brothers and sisters. That helps them reintegrate them back to be with their families. And obviously I want to look after my blood, but I think by being a little bit more generous with a wider net, you can actually do the same for a lot more people.
Yeah, and that's a good trick too. It's an old Indian trick is if you're going to give away money, go to a very poor place to do it. It's no good going to Beverly Hills and setting up a drug treatment center. You need to have
a lot of money to do that.
A lot of money to do that. And so if I'm a third archetype, if I'm a business, right, and I'm doing, is there a business use case that's not, just to the founders of the business in their personal income? In your mind, what can the business or what should the business be doing with Bitcoin in your experience that the individuals aren't?
Yeah, well, I talked about the treasury. I think if you have a treasury, you should be considering part of that in Bitcoin just because of the basements that's happening. Now, the other options are like e-commerce. But I mean, the thing is about e-commerce, I would be thinking, some companies have added Bitcoin payments, but not many people use it. And it's quite expensive to, or complicated to set up. And I would be saying, look, how many of your customers are coming to your website and going, nah, you don't accept Bitcoin, I'm not going to be buying. So I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I don't think people will need to be thinking about that. But let me talk about broader where we're going and some of the interesting things that are happening.
Yeah, because that's my last question for you. If there's not utility and it's mainly what we talked about is scarcity and desire, where actually is the intrinsic value in the coin?
Well, nothing has intrinsic value. Saying anything has intrinsic value is also a red herring. Like, gold doesn't have intrinsic value. It has a market value for industrial use, but it doesn't have intrinsic value. Nothing does. So we hear Peter Schiff talk about and Steve Hanke talk about intrinsic value. It's just a red herring. But if you want to talk about utility, like, we're in this complicated place where we have this new technology / money that people are still figuring out, and a lot of people are against, and a lot of people are scared of, and don't know what to do about it, and want to write it off. But it continues to grow and continues to expand because those people who have Bitcoin, within 4 years, they've realized, holy shit, this is the best form of money. I should be holding my wealth in it. But let's talk about a really interesting side story. El Salvador, President Bukele has made the quite bold decision to make Bitcoin legal tender in the country. So they're a dollarized country for your listeners. They dollarized, it was about 20 years ago, I think it was, 20 or 30 years ago, which has been great for them in terms of having a stable currency, but kind of bad for them in terms of not having a sovereign currency which they control. Now, he took the brave decision of saying, okay, we're going to make Bitcoin legal tender, give people an option to use something else. And he put in place the Bitcoin law. Article 7 says all economic agents are mandated to accept Bitcoin. I was there on September the 9th when the Bitcoin law came in, and I went to Starbucks and I bought a cup of coffee with my Bitcoin. I went to McDonald's and I bought a double cheeseburger. I went to Walmart. Sadly, they're a few days away, so they're not in place. But the really interesting business use cases there is, firstly, me as a foreigner coming into the country and buying with Bitcoin. If I wanted to use my debit card to buy a cup of coffee, on top of the cup of coffee, I pay whatever the charge is, because that getting that $3.50 from the UK to their bank account, there's lots of intermediaries. So I usually get charged an extra dollar or pound, whatever it is, for that. So that makes the product 25% more expensive. But they also have to pay a card processing fee. So Starbucks now in El Salvador, every time they accept Bitcoin, they can have it converted straight back to the dollar, but they're not paying that card processing fee. They're paying a Lightning Network fee, which is pretty much a rounding error from zero, right? We're talking a penny, like a penny, maybe a couple of pennies. They're not paying the 3.5%. Now, you extrapolate that into hundreds of thousands of transactions in El Salvador. Suddenly, someone like Starbucks will look and go, well, hold on a second here. When we accept Bitcoin, we don't have to pay a fee. We don't have to pay a transaction fee. This is incredible. 3.5% across your business is a lot. So what I'd be saying to companies is, like, you don't have to accept Bitcoin right now. You don't have to become a Bitcoin company, but you should certainly be learning it and certainly be aware of it, because 8 years ago it was a toy for nerds. 4 years ago it was a toy for investors. This year it's a treasury asset and an illegal tender in another country. Where are we going to be in 4 years? It might be legal tender in 10 countries. It might be on the balance sheet of half the S&P. And how much longer are you going to watch this and sit on the sidelines?
I like talking to you, Peter, is sort of like we get in a plane and we're planning to go to New York from California, but the plane isn't taking off. But another piece of runway just gets laid down, and we're just going to drive the plane to New York. It doesn't matter if it takes off. Like, you're so full of information. Every piece that you open up, moves us deeper in another area. So, for example, what is the next country in your view, or the next countries are going to tip?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Switzerland, please say Switzerland.
I mean, it feels like a very Swiss idea, right?
Right.
Ukraine. We're getting positive signals for Ukraine, Paraguay, Cuba, other smaller countries. And look, some might not be making legal tender, but they're making it legal to own Bitcoin. So that's where Ukraine is right now. And also you've got like Estonia, Malta, which is very open to crypto companies and very positive towards that. In terms of actual legal tender, I don't know. I think some are sitting there waiting to see how this thing plays out for El Salvador. But then sometimes they're also missing, some of the key points. But I honestly don't know. One is an outlier. Two is a movement. And as soon as we get the second one, I think we get the third, fourth, fifth pretty quickly. And I wouldn't be surprised if it just sweeps through South and Central America.
So leads me into my next question. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think, I'd love to see something big like Ukraine, who could really, it's a fit for their culture. It's a fit for their brand. It would make a big difference in their economy. So something like that to tip would just, turn the whole system accelerate the whole system. But it brings me around to your podcast. What did Bitcoin do? So, I mean, how is this not like a 60-second news bite and an actual, podcast? Isn't it just, hey, Bitcoin's at 62, went down to 59, it's up to 63, podcast over. What happens over at, I mean, I know because I've heard it, but tell people what happens over at what did Bitcoin do and why it's not, why it's longer than 60 seconds.
What Bitcoin did.
Sorry, what Bitcoin did. Yes.
I only do one show a week talking about a month talking about price. I talk to a trader and talk about the market. I don't really check the price. I couldn't even tell you what the price is now because I haven't looked today. Like I say, my thesis is multi-year, so there's no point giving myself anxiety looking at the price or getting overly excited and spending it before I have it. So we talk about a lot of things. We talk about the technology, how it works. We talk about the broader economy, the macroeconomic environment. We talk about governance and governance issues, because I think what's been exposed over the last year certainly is some of the more authoritarian positions that governments are taking worldwide. We look at Australia right now. It's a very strange situation there. The US itself. We talk about central banking, the ills of central banking. We talk about the monetary policy of Bitcoin, which is basically 2 rules. Imagine that. Imagine the US monetary policy was 2 rules. We talk about things like that. So basically, it's a way of, we call it orange people. You remember the red pill and the blue pill in the Matrix? We talk about the orange pill. Right. People come to my show, they get orange pill. They learn about Bitcoin. They learn why it's important. They learn about the technology. But we have wider, interesting discussions of asymmetric topics such as governance and wider economics.
So then let's wrap up with downside protection. So I think for people who've listened and made it this far, have sort of been encouraged or inspired by you, and you have a very interesting personality. It's an exotic personality, but you're very even keeled. So you sort of have 2 sides of it matched up for some reason. You definitely, the cars and some of the experiences in your life really signal, sort of a AAA type of thrill-seeking, adventurous kind of personality. But on the other side, you seem very reasoned and able to be thoughtful about your decision making. You don't usually see those 2 sides of personality, mixed together. But maybe you've just got old enough, and you can't move fast enough to hurt yourself, financially or physically anymore, or with relationships, and you're just doing it right. It's fantastic to hear about your kids, for sure. But let's offer some people, because I do think we did build in a sense of optimism, a sense of hopium, and a sense that this is something that's very reasonable and sane-minded to do, and a bit of an advertorial for Bitcoin. But I want to sort of expose the other side of it, and that there is downside for sure. But what kind of, in your mind, other than the scale of the awareness, the scale of demand, what kind of downside protection do you see in the asset class?
Are you asking me what are the risks?
What are the risks, and then what are the clear risks? Not the nuance, because I think you probably can hit a risk for an hour, and there's every currency has risks. So what are the key risks you should be aware of? And then on the other side of that, what's some of the downside protection to those risks?
Yeah. So one of the biggest risks is how you invest in the asset. And some people can invest and make some money quickly and then start throwing more money in, then lose it, and then, get sucked into the fear and greed, and not understand how markets move. That's always a risk. And I've seen people make and lose a lot of money. I've done it myself. Okay. The way to mitigate that is very simple set of words, which people always say in investing: do not invest anything you can't afford to lose. Just take that position. Secondly, what you really should be doing is what I talked about earlier, which is dollar cost averaging. So just treat it like an investment. Don't try and be a trader. Don't go start trading with leverage. Just dollar cost average. So that's the first one. The second one is, Bitcoin is unique in that it is, when you buy Bitcoin and you send it to yourself, to your wallet, you have final settlement. You hold that Bitcoin. It's not like PayPal, where it's an IOU, or your bank account, which is an IOU from the bank. You physically take control of that Bitcoin. If I send it to you, it's final settlement. And Bitcoin itself is also immutable. So when I send it to you, I can't get it back unless I ask you very nicely. So it requires you to take some responsibility around the security of your Bitcoin, protecting your Bitcoin, understanding what is known as the private keys, and storing them safely so no one can find them. So the risk, is that you lose your Bitcoin or you have it stolen. The way it can get stolen is you get an email and you think it's from a trusted source, or somebody says invest in Bitcoin here and you'll make more money back. The best rule here is treat everyone like the enemy. Fear everyone. And then just look after the security of Bitcoin. The other wider, more existential risk to Bitcoin is regulation. But really, we're starting to see that's starting to fall away now. We're seeing lots of politicians in the US start to understand Bitcoin and be open to it. We're seeing countries be open to it. You now have the regulatory arbitrage. I mean, if you want to, you can just go and live in El Salvador as a Bitcoiner and away from governments who fear Bitcoin. But really, look, honestly, most of the fears are more or less unfounded these days. It all just comes down to personal responsibility with regards to investment and security. I really think we're at a silly point now where people are like still dismissing Bitcoin. It's like it's been here for 13 years. It's nearly $1 trillion market cap. It's been adopted by a country. It's on the balance sheet of Tesla. If you're still ignoring Bitcoin, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your family a disservice for not going out there and actually learning about it. And the best way to do it, go and buy some. Go and buy like $100 of Bitcoin. Send it to yourself. Send it to a wallet and see it happen, because it really is quite magical.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. All right. I'm going to let you get back to your family and your business, but I do think I see why people like the podcast for sure. Because you as an individual, provide, I don't quite call them life lessons, but I think the other side of the balance sheet from high living in finance, which is values, family, focus, poise, grace, getting to the end of the day, satisfaction, knowing that you're building something and leaving a legacy and things of value, and really like those seem to be the core drivers. And then on top of that, the Bitcoin is the knowledge or intellectual property that you trade in. And I think coming into this, I felt like it was going to be the opposite. Like, everything was going to be, Bitcoin and finance driven. And then on top of that, there was a layer of values and family and the important things of life. So I see why people like the podcast, because you put, to me, the most important things in the middle of it. So thank you for sharing that piece of your life.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
All right. Look forward to hang out for a minute. Just to talk to you a little bit after the show. And Daniel's going to run a little bit of a little clip here. And then, Peter, I'll talk to you for a minute after the show. If you're planning to become a deal maker at this level, make sure to join the Daily Deal Maker. We get into one little piece of this daily. And so you're just stacking and stacking and stacking these tools and tactics and strategies until they come out of you as naturally as they come out of me and the people that I work with. Add the tips, tools, strategies, tactics a little bit every day. And by the end of a year, you'll be a totally different, new, improved person and a very strong deal maker.
Hey, thanks for listening. And be sure to stay tuned for more great content from Oren Klaff. If you want to get daily insights and additional assets, go to orenclaff.com/daily and sign up for a 7-day trial of the Daily Deal Maker. See you next time.